Hello, beautiful ladies. I'm Mariquita Solis, Joyful Relationship Coach, and I'm excited to be here on this beautiful Wednesday with Kara-Lee Burke. She is an amazing healer. She's had a really long journey, a little bit of a challenging journey. So I'm excited to hear her story. And thank you for watching, ladies. Whoever is here and whoever's going to catch us on the replay, please remember to give StreamYard permission to use your name. And please ask questions because we're here to serve you. So we will be checking the comments afterwards. If there's any way we can help, we're both here to serve you and to really uplift your lives. So, Kara-Lee, you have a really wonderful, beautiful background of challenges that you've overcome. Can you tell these ladies about yourself?
Oh my goodness. Where do I begin? I struggled with anxiety and depression and suicidal ideation for most of my life. From the time, I can't even remember a time when I was a child when I was really happy. I always felt like, now I understand it as feeling worthless and feeling like I was always a bother. I felt like I was a bother and that I shouldn't have been born. And I found, I had a lot of anger towards my parents for even bringing me to the world because I thought, you don't love me, so why am I here? And for so much of my life, I never understood it. I never understood why that was. And then as I got older, when I was a teenager and then into adulthood in my 20s, I found that I was just sort of moving through life in a fugue state almost, just numb and bouncing from one really toxic and abusive relationship to the next, toxic friends, toxic workplaces. I worked for a number of narcissistic personality types. And I always put myself in this like subservient role to other people. People pleasing was a big issue for me. And I just had no self-awareness, no idea about how to be joyful. I didn't even know that joy really existed. I thought when I was kind of in the crux of my depression and anxiety, when I really didn't want to live anymore, I felt like everybody must think that this way. I thought that everybody in the world thought about killing themselves. I really did. I just thought it was normal, and and I felt like I had nobody to rely on, and I felt like I raised myself, even though I had a normal upbringing, the quote normal. I had a roof over my head, clothes, food, a loving family, but it didn't feel right. I was like the black sheep. I was very isolated and alone. And then it wasn't until later on in my healing journey, like much later, that I realized that a lot of my early childhood experiences were actually the cause of the anxiety and the depression, because, we're not born to feel like we shouldn't be here. That doesn't make any sense, right? Now, that doesn't make any sense now, but at the time I was, I was just in a really dark place for a really long time. My family, always like, you were such a hard child, such a negative, angry, depressed, disconnected child. You didn't have any joy. Like, this was the story that I heard over and over and over again that eventually became my identity. But trauma was not my identity, and I had to recreate that. So, I mean, that's sort of a general overview of how I felt. But what I've been through, I mean, I've been in very domestically violent relationships. I came to realize and have memories come back to me of being sexually assaulted, sexually abused as a child by a close person, proximity in my life. And then I also experienced some self-harm, and I did a lot of cutting and just And we can, we can talk about that if you want to, but I mean, yeah, I've had a lot of pain in my life, a lot of pain that I didn't understand, that I looked for healing. Like it took a while. I started out as a yoga's the answer, as I really liked yoga and exercise and stuff. And I've like gained a lot of weight, lost a lot of weight, up and down, up and down. And so I thought, okay, mindfulness is the answer. Yoga is the answer. I went to India. I became a yoga teacher, a meditation teacher. And then, I'm like, okay, this is okay, but it's still not working. I still, was not feeling great. So then I became a Reiki master. Like, this is awesome, but I'm like, there's something missing still. And then, oh gosh, and now I'm a trauma coach. And so that when I started to learn about trauma and attachment deficits and all that, like, then I started to really integrate the mind, body, soul with spiritual healing, what I call spiritual healing, to embed or integrate like psychology with spiritual practices, with neurobiology. And that's really shifted my whole life around. It's a big story.
But that's very hopeful, right? That it was almost like you had pieces and you were trying to make this the answer. Now I'll make this the answer. Now I'll make this the answer. But you were always on that learning. I mean, that journey of learning, right? Yeah. And so it's beautiful that it kind of all comes together, that you don't know when it's all going to sink. It's all just,
yeah.
That's beautiful. I see where someone is saying, understand that. And someone else is saying, self-harm is where we try to ease the pain as addictions are.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes, you're right. And what would you say about that?
Well, from my trauma understanding, when you're dysregulated, when your natural baseline state is dysregulation, which can be for a number of different reasons, different experiences in your life, then self-harm, or even numbing, but self-harm is actually regulating to your nervous system. It gives you that boost of dopamine that you need when you're feeling extremely low. It's a very natural response to that dysregulation, that feeling of anxiety and depression and worry. So then when you hurt yourself, the way it impacts your brain is that it makes your brain feel calm. It gives you that hit of those, not happy, but like mood regulating hormones, the dopamine, serotonin, that brings you from this hyper aroused state down to a more relaxed state, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I was just looking to see who was on. It was Karen Porch, who she's a healer too, a trauma healer. So that's wonderful that we have all these, all these people really kind of stepping up,
Yeah.
And thank God we have. I mean, where we have turned, like they say, we turned our pain into, we've healed, and now we can be the ones to step up, right? And the people that haven't healed, that's like we say, why do people commit these terrible things like murder? And those are people that are still in the pain, right? And it's that they haven't been healed. They're not terrible people. They're people that are still needing this love that you stepped into and learning about yourself. And it's so true. We get in the patterns of hearing the story about ourselves, and then we take that on as my story instead of kind of opening up to what is the story about me. Because as children, we're really not taught that. We're given those labels in that story instead of, let's see who you will be and let's see what is going to be presented into your life.
I read somewhere this great quote that was like, it said, when we're born, we learn how to survive before we learn how to create our lives. Even though we're born to create, and this is that spiritual side, we're born to create and manifest and attract really great things into our lives, love and joy and abundance. But because of the trauma that we're born into, the generational trauma, the societal trauma that we're born into, we get stuck trying to survive. So we're in this constant state of survival and threat. And we have to unlearn all of that before we can begin to learn how to create our lives, how to be joyful, how to be happy and feel love for ourselves and for other people. Because a lot of the times I find that when we're attracting these really negative and toxic and abusive partners, it's not out of love. It's out of this fear state, a state of survival, because we feel like we need to earn our value somehow from this type of a person. And that's because of the blueprint or the imprint that's been embedded in us from early childhood. But I guess I wanted to just quickly touch on what, in terms of the self-harm, because we can, as healers, we understand the mechanism. And so we can talk about the mechanism and the healing and the nervous system and all that. But when you're in it, when you're in that state of mind, it's almost as if you want to cut out the pain. It's that urge. You don't understand it. You don't understand why. But I remember after this particular argument of something happening with an ex, and I was on our balcony and there was this piece of broken mirror on the ground, and I was just in such a low state, and I just sliced my forehead, and I was just like, I don't know, I just wanted the pain out, but I also wanted him to see what he was doing to me. It's not rational, it's so irrational, but it's in our nervous system. It's a part of the way that our body tries to regulate itself.
Wow, that makes a lot of sense. And I mean, that's such a powerful moment to share. And I mean, just knowing that we can talk about this without judgment is thank you for this gift of that, because there's a lot of people out there, that are ashamed, that feel shame. And we have to, and then to heal shame, we've got to step into empathy for ourselves, and to somehow, even if we don't believe it, just to say, I choose to allow empathy to come into my life today. I choose to acknowledge the thoughts that I have, maybe the thoughts of I'm not good enough, and that's why I'm dating this person that's disrespecting me. But just to kind of allow awareness to come into the picture with love, So, yeah. And so what about this guy? What was that relationship like? It sounds like he really wasn't really honorable. It wasn't a really honorable relationship there.
Well, that was the beginning of a series of very violent and abusive relationships. I met him when I was 16, and I had just had a breast reduction. I had a breast reduction when I was 16. And again, just because people paid attention to my body, and I just wanted it gone. I literally wanted my body just gone. I didn't want to be looked at. I didn't want to be talked about. And this person...
Wait.
Oh, no.
Okay.
Sorry. And this person paid attention to me, and I was in a state of not wanting to be near my family. I just wanted to escape that situation. And I just found this guy who gave me any kind of attention. In the beginning, it's very positive and affirming in a way. And then, but what it is, because we're both young, I met him, so I was 16, and then we dated for about 4 years. We moved in together. And oh God, it's such a big story. I don't want to take up all this time with this one guy, but he had a lot of pain and trauma from his own experience. He was abandoned by his father, a lot of fear around abandonment. And so there was a lot of jealousy in that relationship because of his own experience by being abandoned by his father. My father had basically abandoned me too. And so there's just like this, you attract the people that those abusive types of people in your life are a mirror to the wounds of your own inner being. So he was reflecting back at me my own feeling of worthlessness, but we struggled in this dynamic of like power and control, because he felt like he had no control over his life, and I was all about giving up my power to other people to feel worthy. And that's kind of how that dynamic of the abusive relationships typically happen where one person is subservient and one person is more dominant, but it's all based on your nervous system and how you tend to react to threat and stress. Whereas I was more stuck in that freeze moment, and subservient, and like making myself small in order to survive the situation, just saying yes and people pleasing and all that. And he was stuck in that very dominant control, attack mode. And that was in his nervous system, his way of trying um, to avoid harm, right?
Mm.
And that's that fight, flight, freeze response. That's a part of our autonomic nervous system. That's for our own survival. And so, our relationships, our toxic and abusive relationships, tend to be just this fight for survival, and where each of us has our own different pathologies that we that have been sort of built up over time based on our experiences in our lives and based on our own. I mean, we can go into the epigenetics and why one person might react one way, another person might react another way, and it's generational. It goes back through a lot of time. Hormones also, like men have more testosterone. It makes them more dominant, more aggressive, whereas women don't have as much, and so you tend to be more subservient. So there's so many different things that go into why these relationships play out the way that they do. But yeah, like he was a very just hurt, wounded person, and so was I. And we attracted each other at that point in our lives. And I continued to do that for a long time with other people, and not just, and I, like I said before, not just romantic relationships, but you can find the same pattern in your friendships and workplaces. I worked for a lot of narcissistic bosses, type A personalities, where I, again, was that subservient person. Yes, people pleaser, trying to earn love and respect, to the same type of personality type. Even I had one boss who was very abusive towards his wife, and they had that same dynamic, but I was his executive assistant, but I was still in that same subservient role. So it's interesting, the dynamic and how it plays out throughout your lives, and those patterns you can see in not just your romantic relationships, but like everywhere throughout, even in your relationships with your family, your parents. It's very similar, the pattern, the behaviors.
Yeah, you're right. And it's so, I mean, it's exciting when you do see that, you have that awareness to see what's going on. Like, oh my gosh, now I see, like, I used to think that all men drank because I hung out at the bars. But now, and then now I hang out at the library and I see that not all men drink because, like, we'll get stuck in these patterns. So, you know what I mean? Or because maybe I had to hung out with parents that were always at the bar and that's what was natural for me, right? And then I think, well, that's natural. All men drink. But then we have awareness that it's our environment, right? When you're talking about epigenetics, it's higher than the genes. So it's exciting. I was looking at the comments. Can you see them?
No, not on here.
Okay, so it was Karen. She said self-harm can go too far, accidental suicide, which is so true. And she also says body is seen as disconnected from you. And what about, she's asking, do you use the polyvagal theory?
Yes. And so the polyvagal theory, when you are, I'm going to talk about healing in terms of resolving your trauma, because this person obviously is a trauma coach and they understand how that works. So we'll never be completely healed because the way our neural pathways are built, like, they don't actually ever completely disappear. We can, erode them slowly and build new ones, new healthier ones. But when we are trying to resolve our trauma and change our lives, it's really important to become aware of how your nervous system is functioning at any given time. So when you are in any situation in your life, and you can learn to assess your current state of arousal, so threat or stress, then you can use the tools that the polyvagal theory talks about in order to decrease your arousal state, in order to bring you back into a more equilibrium or balance or state of homeostasis. and a relaxed state. And the polyvagal theory talks a lot about using our social environment, because humans are meant to be our relational beings. We are meant to connect and relate and be vulnerable and be intimate with other human beings. And so when you can find other people who are on the same path as you, or a coach, or like you're doing this group, find other people who are on this healing journey, who are maybe even a little bit further ahead than you, they can help you learn to be more regulated, help you come back to that more calm state of being when you're feeling super aroused. But the important part is that you have to become aware of not only how you feel when you're aroused, but what triggers the arousal state, what triggers the stress response. But co-regulation is an extremely important part of trauma healing, because a lot of the times we feel threatened around other people who have complex PTSD. A lot of the times feel threat when they're in social environments around other people who they don't know. And so they need to learn to train their nervous system how to feel calm and collected and in control and relaxed when they are in that threat response, or when they're in environments or around other people that they don't know, that might trigger a fear response or protective response. So I hope that kind of makes sense. But
yeah, it does make sense. And
so,
yeah, definitely. I was talking to a lady in the group earlier, and talking about, she heard just the fears of, I think the trigger for her is knowing about her boyfriend's exes, and how she feels threatened by them, and what would you say to that? I mean, because we have a lot of fears, and just the word, maybe the mention of that name of an ex would trigger something. And what would you say, would be the beginning kind of a path to healing here? And what's the issue behind that?
Oh my gosh, what a loaded question. It really depends on the state, on the conversation. If I'm dating first of all, that's a red flag. If you don't know, if you are somebody who has had attachment trauma from early childhood in your life, or even trauma from an ex before, in abusive or toxic relationship, the mention of an ex brings up old memories from your painful past.
Let me ask you this. What would you say is attachment trauma for people that don't really know what that is?
Okay, so attachment theory is that we perceive and engage in relationships based on, it's like a subconscious programming from the relationships that we had or observed in our childhood or early infancy. So there's different types of attachment styles. So there's 4 different attachment styles: secure attachment, avoidant attachment, anxious attachment, or disorganized attachment. And they're directly related with how your caregivers interacted with you or treated you. And it's not always a really toxic or abusive environment. It could be, someone might develop an avoidant attachment style when their parent wasn't around, like they were workaholics, worked too much, you're stuck with the nanny all the time, you're watching TV all the time, and you didn't really get those emotional needs met from that parent because they were absent. And so you learn to be this lone wolf. You learn to avoid relationships because you never had your needs met. So there's different cause and effect of what the relationships that you experienced in early childhood with your primary caregiver, whether it was a biological parent or adopted parent or other. And that will directly impact how you engage in relationships later on in life. Does that make sense?
Yeah. And so you were talking about the anxious attachment, I think, right?
I got off. We were talking about
the ex, like when your ex is.
Right. So when your partner brings up an ex, I would look at, why are they bringing up the ex? Is it, first of all, it could be a red flag. So if they're talking about, a lot of, oh, my ex was so crazy. Well, what made them crazy? What was it about the relationship that made them crazy? So you might be actually engaging right now with a partner who is an avoidant attachment style, who had this need to disappear from the relationship and really have their own space, which drove that ex crazy because that person was always leaving them, and then that triggered that ex's fear of abandonment. And so when you have that anxious attachment style and you hear your partner bring up an ex, you're automatically going to jump into, oh my God, they're going to abandon me. They're going to leave me for their ex. But that's triggering that feeling of of your needs aren't, you can't get your needs met by a loved one. And then you feel like you need to grasp on to control your own environment, to control this situation. I got off on a tangent in my mind, and I get so excited about it. But I would say if you're feeling anxious when your partner's bringing up an ex, I would look at your own past programming on how your needs weren't met by somebody who was supposed to love and care for you and nurture you, and how maybe they abandoned you in your childhood. So were you abandoned in some way, emotionally, physically, in some way when you were a child, and that now you feel like somebody's going to abandon you for somebody else? So that's more of that a fear of abandonment when somebody brings up their ex. But again, context is everything. So it could also be a red flag. It depends on what this person is saying about their ex. Is this a person who has an ex-wife who has children and they need to co-parent this child? Are you feeling anxious around that? And again, I think that's just bringing up that fear of abandonment inside of you, feeling like your needs aren't going to be met, like you're not going to be made a priority because you weren't made a priority at some point in your life when you needed to be made a priority. You needed to be loved and nurtured and cared for, and in your those emotions, So again, context is really everything. So I need more specifics with that particular question, but
yeah, that's a good answer though. I mean, it's deeper. I mean, like the layers of an onion, we're just looking through at the layers. It's not just a surface level thing here. Like, oh, well, I'm jealous. There's more to it than that. And I can see exactly what you're saying, because I have a friend who's had a parent so the parent was a father, and the father didn't have a father. So he never learned the parenting skills, right? So then there's some attachment thing with this friend of mine, because, the fear of the abandonment. I think it was that abandonment that I never had the father, because his father didn't learn how to be a father. So, how it just is all going down the generations like you're talking about. And it makes so much sense, when we look at the different layers and it takes bravery and knowing and love to look at that, compassion and empathy. And that way we can step away from the shame of how it should have been or what I didn't get, and looking at the people with love.
It's definitely that. And like you and I were talking about before the live stream started, is it's not about blame. We're not here to blame your parents or your grandparents. My grandmother, there's so much trauma in both sides of my family. My grandmother was sexually abused by her father and her brothers. She was raped by her brothers. My great grandmother was an alcoholic and who had a lot of trauma in her family, and that gets passed on genetically, but also experientially, right? So my grandmother, because of her experience growing up, she was an alcoholic, and my mom grew up in that environment. And my mom was always this people pleaser and a perfectionist, and And my mom had an anxious attachment style and unresolved trauma from her childhood. So she couldn't be the parent that I needed. And I didn't have that connection, that attunement, that love and compassion that I needed. I was, shamed and blamed and stuff, but it's not her. And for a long time, I blamed my mom. I was so angry. But, and then she attracted my stepfather, who's like an avoidant attachment style, who, it is kind of like that lone wolf. He ignores my mother's needs, but then she's always chasing him and he's always running away. And then we also mirror these relationships in our own lives later on from what we experienced, what we saw. So it's not only what we directly experienced from our parent. Maybe we had one really loving parent, but what we saw in the dynamic between our two caregivers was something very unhealthy or toxic, and where you have like one anxious, one avoidant style person who has that chasing, running away sort of experience, or whatever it is, that will also impact how you experience relationships and how you engage in relationships later on in life. And you repeat those patterns that you saw, that you experienced, until you become aware that that pattern is in you, where it comes from, and then do the work to resolve the trauma. And look, when we say trauma, sometimes comes the vision of like severe abuse comes to mind, but that's not. Trauma happens to us when we experience something and we are kind of left alone with the emotions, the residual emotions from that experience. We had nobody to kind of support us and love us and help us through that, carry us through, and to explain things to us and help us understand it. We were alone in that. So we felt alone. We felt worthless, but we don't understand the term worthless. Like when I had a therapist once say to me, "Oh, you struggle with perfectionism and you have self-esteem issues, and or you feel worthless. You don't feel like you don't deserve a better partner." I was like, "Well, that doesn't make any sense. Of course, I feel like I deserve somebody, but this is this is on your subconscious. This is like beneath the conscious mind. This is what drives your behaviors and your acts, your thoughts, your beliefs, your choices. That is very unconscious, and you have to become conscious of and aware of the patterns in your life, and know that you are the common denominator in everything. And why is it that you draw these experiences to you? Why is it that you react this way when somebody brings up their ex? Because nobody has control over how you feel. You have the power over how you feel, but until you learn how to understand those triggers, those emotions, and the sensations that are stored inside your body, you can't control them. They're out of your control because they're built into your autonomic nervous system because of that painful past programming in your life. So it's like, it's a big circular thing that needs work, and it needs intentional conscious work on a regular daily basis. But once you start to understand the steps and learn how to self-regulate, and you learn how to become aware of your triggers and the sensations in your body where the emotions are stored and all of that, once you learn all of that, then it becomes easier. You start to feel a sense of power that you never had before over your life, over your emotions. And then other people slowly but surely stop affecting you the same way. So it's a process, and it takes conscious intention. But I guess what we're doing here today in this conversation is really about trying to bring awareness to the fact that it's not your fault that you are this way, that you feel anxious, that you like, if somebody's telling you that, why do you get so angry when I talk about my ex, and you react this way, that's not your fault. It's part of your it's built into your autonomic nervous system. There's programming inside of you that has created this in you, these reactions, these responses. So let's look at why. Why do you react this way? We have to look back, like you say, peel back the onion, the layers. Why do you feel this way? Where do you feel it in your body? Where's that feeling, that sensation? I also do somatic healing, somatic experiencing, somatic healing. So it's stress, the trauma is stored inside of your body. So we have to release that energy from your body so that it kind of resolves the circle of from the original trauma, the original experience that caused the trauma to get stuck inside of your body. So, I mean, you can go on a tangent with that.
There's so much. I mean, we could talk for hours, but anyway, so we are going to try to wrap it up here in a minute. But so let me read some more comments. So thanks for watching, Sarah. And I think it might be Karen that says intergenerational trauma is sad, but holds great hope when the cycle is stopped. And it's not your fault. It's so freeing to the person. Yes, it is, because shame is the biggest block to creation. I mean, that's like a huge block. We can't create anything from shame. So, you know, and empathy is the healer to shame, knowing that we're all beautiful and we deserve the best life as we are now. You know, we don't have to prove ourselves or be validated by this guy or this woman or anyone. You know, we have the power to validate ourselves and to say, you know what, I choose to love myself as I am today. And with all my imperfect and perfect, you know, parts of me, I embrace them all. So, you know, and then in growth.
I think when someone pointed out to me that forgiveness, like I was looking at former parts of myself from my childhood or when I was a teenager and choices that I made. I said to this therapist, I said, I hate that person that I was. I hate her. And how hurtful is that? Making choices from a state of survival. And so by looking at that former self and having compassion and love, but mostly forgiveness for her, I was able to really shift my mindset around what I was capable of in this life when I looked at that past self through a lens of forgiveness and compassion. Yeah.
Well, that's beautiful. I mean, you're so right. It's so easy to beat ourselves up. And we were doing the best we could at the time. You know, we were scared. We didn't think we were good enough, you know, but now we do know. And just to have compassion to that little girl, that little child that was so afraid, that didn't know what to do, that was begging for love and doing anything to prove that she was loved, you know, and so to look at it, like you're saying, from that tenderness and forgiving, and it's just a beautiful gift. And like I think Karen said, you know, it's not your fault. It's so freeing to the person. So this are beautiful steps of awareness that you're sharing with us. So before we go, is there anything else you wanted to share? And besides that, I want you to tell everybody how they can find you and reach out to you and what you could, you know, you have. So.
Yes. You know, I get so caught up in the neuroscience, the neurobiology, but I really started this on a spiritual quest. And it's really the indigenous cultures for centuries have like a 4-step system, I guess, not a system, but it's a part of how they heal, because trauma's been around for centuries, you know, like, and there's been ways to heal that before we even understood how the mind worked. But what are those 4 parts of that? I want to just quickly touch on that. Community is one, which is what you're building here, and it's beautiful. Having that community around you, wherever it is, the people of like-minded people on the same journey who can really help support you. Whether it can be a therapist, it can be a Facebook group, it can be friends who really understand you and can be compassionate and supportive of you, family, whoever. The next part is meaning, which is a big part of what spirituality is. It's about coming to a sense of meaning in your life, creating meaning of those past experiences that hurt you, no matter what they were, and finding value in them and purpose in your life, even though you've experienced all of this pain, and even though you feel anxious, and even though you feel unworthy. How can you find purpose and meaning in your life? Because you are worthy, your life has meaning. And I want to help you find that purpose and passion for this life right now, whether you believe in reincarnation or not. This life is really important. And I want to help people find that passion and purpose in this life, no matter what you experienced in the past. And then the next part is grounding through nature. So grounding is really important part of healing trauma, but grounding in nature, the natural world, and that can be out in nature. It can be an animal. When you watch and connect with your pets, that can be extremely healing because they're so instinctive. They know how to heal their own trauma. They know how to, or move past a moment of trauma in their lives. They know how to sense things. They can sense people. And when you connect with animals in the natural world, you naturally feel grounded and relaxed and in control of yourself, of your emotions. You feel more cohesive, interconnected with everything. That's really important. And then they also have, and which we have, the pharmacotherapy sort of side. They use like the, what's it called? The ayahuasca ceremonies and stuff, which is also a huge part of healing in like the shaman traditions, the indigenous cultures. I won't go too much into that, into the pharmaceuticals and stuff, but that's the fourth part, the smaller part of the resolving your trauma and healing from these like painful relationships and all of that stuff. In terms of what I do, I've created a program, an 8-week program to help women heal after abuse and toxic relationships through a program called Heal from the Wound Up. So it's really focused on healing those inner wounds inside of you. And with all this, like I do the neuroscience and the self-regulation and the polyvagal theory and somatic experiencing and energy healing and all of that and grounding in nature and stuff. But then I also have this huge emphasis on, okay, now that we've done the healing work, so you know how to heal, how to bring yourself from an aroused, anxious, worried state to a more grounded, calm state of being. Now that you know how to do that, when you're triggered, when you're feeling anxious, now we can move into that, okay, now what is my purpose? What is my passion? Who am I? Because a lot of the times when we've been traumatized, we lose that sense. Literally, your brain loses the ability to know itself, to be self-aware, to visualize a future. So a lot of times people who've been traumatized or have these experiences in these relationships don't feel like meditation is very triggering, or they don't know how to visualize because that is blocked. Your brain doesn't have that ability. So I help you through that to learn and decide, make those choices of who am I going to be in this life? Who do I want to be? Who am I? And then align with your soulful passion and purpose. And then I teach people how to attract or manifest their true destiny. But all those other two steps need to happen first. So I have a program that I created called Heal from the Wound Up, and you can learn more about it on a free 20-minute reinvention session call with me. And I'll put the link to the Acuity Scheduler in the comments below. So if you want to have a call with me, 20-minute call that's free to decide or to learn about the program that I've created and to learn more about how I can help you, then click that link and schedule yourself into my calendar and we can chat about it.
That's a wonderful gift. I mean, really, please take Kara-Lee up on this, ladies. If you resonate with her, she's got a beautiful energy. She knows, she's an expert on this. She's really explored her path, with courage and with empathy and love. So, she's a beautiful gift to us all. So thank you so much for being here, Kara-Lee. I really appreciate it. And thank you, ladies, for watching. So let me see this other comment. It was, forgiveness doesn't have to come from us. We receive forgiveness from God. A wonderful feeling. Yes, it's beautiful. God is everywhere, no matter what you call God, and that something loves us out there, right? Something greater than us.
I want to touch on that. God loves you no matter what. You don't have to ask for forgiveness. You are already forgiven. There's so much love for you. So hold that in your heart right now. Just hold that love and forgiveness that the universe, God has for you. No matter what you've done, no matter what you've experienced, you're already forgiven. You're already loved.
That is so true and so beautiful. I'm glad that you said that. Yes, to just end on that beautiful note, we to feel that warmth in our hearts. So, well, thank you all. This has been a beautiful experience. And we got to have to do it again, Kara-Lee,
Yeah.
down, a few
Yeah.
months down the road.
Sure. Thank
All
you
right.
for having me. Thank you, everybody, for watching. I appreciate all of you. So much love.
Everybody have a blessed day. Bye.
Bye.